In this episode, the eagerly anticipated Gunite crew shoots to the concrete roof of our earth-sheltered house. With the Gunite crew coming, I took the day off work and got out there early to get the plastic off. Bad weather was looming, so I probably shouldn't have taken all the plastic off, but I figured the crew would want to start with an inspection and I didn't know which area they'd want to shoot first. By mid-morning, I was starting to wonder if I had the wrong day, but at some point, pallets of Portland cement arrived. Followed later by the first dump truck of sand. Eventually, some of the crew did show up to drop off the Gunite rig. They told me that they didn't even plan to shoot that day due to the heavy rains that were expected that night. At least now I had my expectations adjusted, and it's hard to complain about the rain when you're worried about the coming snow, and I was just glad they'd arrived. The sand kept coming all day, and that compressor truck also arrived. That sand and bags of concrete are the ingredients that they'll mix to get the Gunite, so not quite as strong a mix as the shotcrete. Since it was now the end of the day, they covered the sand with plastic and left. I was a bit disappointed, but I was glad that they didn't take the rig with them. I recovered the roof and headed home myself. It rained all night and all the next morning, but everyone showed up early afternoon. The startup process to get the mud flowing is always quite slow, but eventually I was able to film the first shot. A few adjustments to get the consistency right, and we're on our way. They started on the toroidal vault right over the guest room. The gunner, Ben, can control the flow rate of the water as it mixes with the cement and sand, with that red valve on the back of the nozzle. For more details on this part of it, you can check out an earlier video we did. The card for that will be up in the top right. That cement dust cloud quickly covered my camera and I moved it back. But it was still in the cement cloud, so I moved it all the way up the hill to the top of the garage. From this view, you can see how the gunner is controlling the spray. Here, I'm pretty sure that pressure of the nozzle is helping him lift it. Being a good gunner takes a lot of experience to know where to shoot, and how much to shoot, and the mix to shoot, and then of course stamina to keep shooting all day, especially with the challenging project that I was giving them. I had a second camera running below this vault. And here you can see the Gunite just pouring down through the lath and screen. With shotcrete, that screen had kept the mess completely out. You can see that in the master bedroom shoot. I'll link to the card in the top right corner. But clearly this much finer sand-based Gunite was shooting through much more readily. You can see that it does build up and stop blowing through. In this later vid, you can see the occasional puff coming through when it hits a clean bit of screen for the first time. So now the weight is accumulating above the lath, and you can see it shifting. The steel arches were all fine, but in the widest unsupported spot, conked in, kind of oil canning. We quickly made some bracing and wedged it in place. That section done, and the crew moved on to shoot the radial vaults over the playroom. While Ben continued to shoot, Scott shifted gears to finishing the surface over the first vault. The biggest challenge here was making sure that things were properly sloped toward the two drain points, and he did a great job. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew had already started packing up. It was a short day because it was Halloween and everyone was heading out to take their kids trick-or-treating. The next day's weather started poorly. Here Ben is shooting a thinner mix to make sure it properly encased all the rebar in this area. If you're thinking, I wonder where all that slurry is going, let me show you. It was just pouring out below. Once he realized it was too thin, he thickened his mix, and I got a shovel and bucket. I should also cleaned off the sides of the ribs, but I got distracted and ended up needing to polish those for hours at a later date. Up top, Ben just kept on shooting out the concrete. Then it started raining again. Arrgh. The guys quickly finished what they were shooting, smoothed off what they had, and covered it. As per usual in life, bad weather passes quickly, and they were able to get back to work. Earlier I had told Ben that I would really like to give the nozzle a try, if he found any spot that was somewhat idiot-proof. Apparently this was the spot. After a few minutes I handed it back so he could fix what I just did. The nozzle wasn't nearly as heavy as the shotcrete nozzle, but I'm still pretty sure I couldn't do it for an hour, let alone all day. This is Carlos. At this point, his job is hose management, basically the gunite equivalent of a bridesmaid. But now Carlos switches to the finishing job. All the jobs are critical, but that one is an art form. And the gunite goes on. Speaking of critical jobs, let's go down to the kitchen where Craig and Joe are making the gunite. The first 90% of this rig is basically a big mixer. The skid steer dumps a load of sand in the vibrating hopper, and then it goes back to get some more. He brings back another load, and then they just leave it there with a full bucket ready to use it when they need it. Taking a closer look, you see the hopper vibrates the sand down, and an auger in the bottom measures out the sand at the right rate. Meanwhile, Joe is adding 90-pound bags of Portland cement to the cement hopper. There's a sharp tooth edge in the middle of the screen that he uses to rip open the bag. An auger in the bottom of that hopper also measures out the right amount of cement. Both the sand and the cement get mixed as they move up the Archimedes screw elevator. Then the dry mix falls down into a funnel that compresses little clumps, like meatballs, into a rotating tray. The gun part works like a revolver in that it stops the rotation for a moment, injects a shot of air, and then it rotates the cylinder so the next clump is ready to be shot. Over and over and over very quickly, the successive air-powered clumps shoot down this hose, and water gets added at the nozzle as it shoots out onto the roof. Joe and Craig keep burning through the pallets of stucco and keep the gun firing all day. Meanwhile, back on the roof, after seeing the mess that came through the lath and screen, I was scrambling to prevent more mess. I didn't have time to prevent it totally, but I at least wanted to cover the wood and sand with plastic. We were done just barely in time. That scene with the slurry dripping down is pretty horrific, actually. Backing up to watch that from the roof with the other camera, things look much nicer up here. Note that the wide-angle lens makes the tower hole look large compared to the vaults. In reality, the radius of the circle is only about 1/4 of the radius of the radial vaults. This is the best view of that nozzle and water valve that you're going to get in this video. You can see him make a slight adjustment. Ben is focused on building up the heavy gunite in a balanced way that won't slump off or cave in the formwork. Back there, Carlos is forming the chimney base. I was pretty impressed that Carlos could almost keep up with Ben. For the shotcrete crew that we had before, 3 guys couldn't keep up with the gunner, and it never looked close to this good. Here Oscar is the new bridesmaid, helping Ben by managing that hose, relaying messages from the rig, etc. But here he switches to shoveling off the rebound, and that makes him a real hero, at least compared to that shotcrete crew we hired in the past that left a ton of mess. Meanwhile, Ben moved up to the top of the quad deck for that final section. Note all the sand that flies everywhere. I always forget how messy gunite is, and I wish I had better covered some sections like that stone wall. It does sweep off, but only if you get to it quick. By this point, it was getting late and Carlos was pooped from all his finish work, so Ben and Oscar took over with a basic troweling of the top of the quad deck. Dark sure comes fast. Backing up a few hours, and here's that last period again from my second camera. From this angle you can see the steady finishing work and that Joe and Craig are busy fixing some blockage issue. Those happen occasionally. Those pink insulation end walls, those and that whole south wall will get gunite the next day. But this video is long enough, so I'll end after this clip, and the end wall gunite will be the next video. More details will be on the webpage, link in the doobly-doo. Please link, subscribe, leave a comment, etc. Let's feed that YouTube algorithm so it recommends this video to more people who may also be interested. That's the good kind of viral.